Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and we're still discussing the fallout from AOC's comments and those of her comrades on the cable news talkies about Border Patrol and about what we're doing as a country to try to deal with the influx or the attempted influx of migrants at our southern border. AOC, you'll recall, said this.
The United States is running concentration camps on our southern border, and that is exactly what they are. They are concentration camps. I want to talk to the people that are concerned enough with humanity to say that we should not, that never again means something.
Yeah, saying that on Instagram Live while donning a Rematriate the Land T-shirt. Hey. And then getting backed up by the likes of CNN political commentator Angela Nye, who suggested not only is AOC substantively correct, but that we're just a half a step from those concentration camps at the border being turned into death camps. Because, you know, we have a fascist president, something else that AOC said. What does Victor Davis Hanson say? For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend VDH, National Review columnist, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and author of the book, The Case for Trump. VDH, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So what about that concentration camp comparison that you're getting from the left now?
Well, I guess it's hard to know whether they're just demagoguing the issue or they're just historically ignorant, because people don't willingly risk their lives to go into concentration camps, and that's what people from Central America are doing. In other words, they're marching 1,000 miles and then illegally crossing into the United States, and then their first act is to illegally reside in the United States, and even though they're supposedly willingly being marched off to a concentration camp, of which the nature of which they know about. I mean, concentration camps don't offer tutorials and things like transgender acculturation as we do in some of these places. So it's so divorced from reality. I don't know whether they're just insane or they don't know anything about the Holocaust or the origins of concentration camps or what it doesn't make any sense.
Oh, she's ignorant to history. There's no question about that. But do you think she owes people an apology, especially to those Holocaust survivors that are still alive?
Yeah, I think she does. Anytime anybody evokes the Holocaust or Hitler, you know that they don't have an argument. And so that's a reduction to Hitler, reduction to the Holocaust. It just means that they don't have any rational exegesis about what's going on, so they just use these scare topics and reference, and then they hope that the shock makes the argument in lieu of a rational, inductive argument, and that's what it is.
And what is the reality? I'm sorry, what the reality on the ground in California? We've spoken to you about this before, but I think it bears repeating, particularly as you're getting more stories about the difficulties managing not just San Francisco anymore, but L.A., managing Seattle, up and down the West Coast in these sanctuary states and sanctuary communities. And it's not all attributable to people here illegally, but that certainly is an exogenous factor. And you see this firsthand on a daily basis where you reside.
Well, when people cross the border, that's not the end of it. When 1 million in 6 months flood into the United States, that's the beginning of a whole series of events that people like Gavin Newsom, our governor, or people who are running for president are shielded from because of their influence, wealth, whatever. But on the ground, if you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, which I just did 2 days ago, and a 20-minute appointment turns into 2 hours, and you're one of the only people, I think I was one of the only people speaking English, and that experience is reported. I repeat it every day at the emergency room or social welfare office. You have to deal with 20 million people who are here illegally and don't have the skills necessarily to compete in a sophisticated society. So the state has to intervene to offer parity, and that means that society as we know slows down, and that's what's happening in California. I don't know the people on my road anymore. I grew up here. I was born in this house where I'm speaking from, but I must have 50 or 60 people within a quarter-mile radius that came here illegally from Mexico, and we've had everything from cockfights to chop shops to gang shootouts. Nobody ever asked me if it was okay for these people to come here illegally, live next to you without any vetting at all. I have no idea where they're from. I don't know whether whether they're criminals or not. I just know that the neighborhood is completely altered when I walk in my orchard at night and I see stripped down cars or somebody injected heroin, or I find a corpse in the orchard, that hasn't happened in this history of my farm in 140 years. So we're going backward in time as it is, regressing back to pre-modern society. And that's what's happening in California. We have medieval diseases on our streets, like, typhus in L.A. County, and L.A. City Hall and the L.A. police station had to be evacuated, or hepatitis A outbreaks because of homelessness. And we've got San Francisco has the highest per capita property crime rate of any major city in the United States. And that's juxtaposed this $3 trillion infusion of enormous wealth into Facebook, Apple, and Google's market capitalization. So you can see that we're sort of a medieval society with very wealthy people on top telling us and virtue signaling us that you have to do this and open your borders, but they themselves, they live in gated communities, they put their kids in prep school. Gavin Newsom, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi are all multimillionaires, if not, in Feinstein's case, a billionaire. And they're never subjected firsthand to the consequences of their ideology.
And describing the reality on the ground generates this response, this asymmetrical response from some of the demagogues of the left. You're afraid of the other. Yeah, this is you. You're afraid of white people losing power in this country, and that's what this is about.
Well, I'm not, because I have Mexican American people and my nephews, sister-in-law, in my immediate family, and I put all three of my children in the public schools 2 miles away that were about 90% Hispanic. And so if I was so afraid of the other, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done what my colleagues who are very progressive at Stanford University do 200 miles away where I work, and that is they put all their kids in prep schools, they live in Woodside, Menlo Park, and then they get on their soapboxes and pontificate about diversity as long as they don't have to encounter it. I like middle class and poor people, so that's not the issue. The issue is if you don't have the rule of law and you pick and choose which statutes you want to obey, then the whole system breaks down, and that's what's happening in California. So if somebody on my street gets arrested and they have a felony conviction and they're here illegally, then they're put into an overnight jail, but ICE is not notified. They can't be deported. And then they're let out. And so I'm looking right now in a 360-degree circle around my house. I'm out on the lawn this morning, and there's been about 3 people killed in the last 6 months, either in auto accidents or in murders by people here illegally from Mexico. And they were not, and we knew they were here illegally, and we knew they had a criminal record, and yet ICE was not notified. So it's a very different world on the ground, I guess, what I'm struggling to say, than what our elites tell us. And I just wish that Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden or Dianne Feinstein or Mark Zuckerberg, all of these concerned virtue signaling social justice warriors, would just for once say, I want to live in a community that I'm empathetic to, and I want to put my kids in the schools that I champion, and I want to work and socialize with the people that I am so close to, but they don't do that.
Well, what do you think, if you were president, what do you think should be happening along the border? Just not let anybody in, or what is your idea?
Well, we've been reduced to sort of an Orwellian impasse, haven't we, where anything that he suggests about border security, even if it's 100% in line with what Democrats used to advocate, is going to be rejected. So he's done the most draconian things that a person can imagine. He shut down the government in the winter to try to get border security, and then he threatened to level tariffs against Mexico, and then he tried to garner funds from existing budgets in different cabinetcies, and he still can't do it. But it's not that he's not trying, and I think part of the problem is that Mexico and Central America realize that if they can embarrass the president and send literally hundreds of thousands of people across the border, then he's discredited with his base and he won't be reelected. And if he's not reelected, there'll be an administration that's very sympathetic to open borders and radical demographic changes in the United States.
The reaction to President Trump's reelection rally in Orlando the other night was for the Orlando Sentinel to issue their endorsement for the 2020 presidential race. Anybody but Trump. They've already basically conceded that they're going to endorse whoever the Democrats nominate. Isn't that reaction to Trump exactly why Trump won in 2016?
I think it is, because that would mean that they're perfectly happy with our first mainstream socialist candidate, Bernie Sanders, if he were to be nominated. And that would mean that whether we like it or not, the Democrats, after the convention is over, the nominee will be running on a platform that has the new Green Deal, reparations, near infanticide as abortion, a wealth tax, free college tuition, the abolition of almost everything. You know, the ICE, get rid of ICE, get rid of the Electoral College, get rid of student debt. So that's sort of a blanket endorsement of almost the most radical platform we're going to see in our lifetime.
He is the great Victor Davis Hanson, historian, National Review columnist, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and the book, The Case for Trump. VDH, thanks as always for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.